There are places where the forgotten go to sleep. At St. Catherine's nursing home, something beneath the basement wakes up with them. Welcome to nightmares in small doses. I never accepted that my mother had Alzheimer's. I accepted the paperwork, the scans, the appointments where doctors with soft voices told me to be realistic. I accepted selling her apartment to pay for the St. Catherine's nursing home. I accepted learning to speak slowly, not correcting her when she called me by my father's name, smiling when she asked if I had just come home from school. But I never accepted that. Maybe that's why I noticed the hum. It started during the first week I visited her. A low sound, almost subcutaneous, like an old refrigerator working too hard behind the walls. St. Catherine's was immaculate. Polished floors, spotless plastic plants, nurses with embroidered names, photographs of saints in expensive frames. It didn't smell like a nursing home. It smelled of lavender and something metallic the lavender was trying to hide. My mother didn't seem unhappy. That should have comforted me. She would sit by the window in the common room, a green blanket over her knees, smiling at things I couldn't see. Every now and then, she pressed 2 fingers to her left temple and frowned. "Does your head hurt?" I asked her. She looked at me as if I were a polite stranger. "No, it's calling." I asked her who. She pointed at the floor. The hum was louder on the days she said that. For months, I blamed the pipes, the lifts, the boiler. Then I started noticing the other residents. The more lucid ones heard it less. The ones who were almost always sedated tilted their heads at the same time, like sunflowers turning towards an underground light. At 3 in the afternoon, when the home fell quiet after lunch, there were always a few seconds when all the open mouths of the sleeping residents breathed in the same rhythm. Inhale, the hum rose. Exhale, the hum fell. I mentioned it to a new care assistant, Diane. She was too young to have learned the professional lie. She looked down the corridor before answering. "Don't go down to level -1. I hadn't asked her anything about level -1. At St. Catherine's, the lift had buttons down to the ground floor, but I had seen the director use a key and press a hidden button with no number. When the doors opened again, 2 nurses came up from below, wearing disposable aprons and pushing an empty wheelchair. One of them had a glowing blue drop on her sleeve. Diane disappeared 3 days later. They told me she had found a job somewhere else. On my next visit, my mother was different. A small crescent of hair had been shaved behind her left ear. On the thin skin beneath it was a round mark, almost healed, as if someone had pressed a hot coin there. The nurse said she had hit her head on the headboard. My mother grabbed my wrist with a strength I didn't think she still had. "Don't let me sleep when it gets hungry." I didn't cry there. I should have cried. I should have screamed. I should have called the police and made such a scene that someone would have been forced to listen. Instead, I did what tired people do when they're afraid of sounding insane. I waited for proof. The following week, I brought my father's old key with me, one of those universal keys he used when he worked in maintenance. At 8:40 p.m., after the shift change, I hid in the visitor's bathroom until the corridor lights dimmed. At night, the nursing home was a different building. The photographs of saints seemed to look downward, not at us, but at whatever existed beneath our feet. I reached the lift. The key didn't fit the hidden panel. I almost gave up. Then I heard wheels. I pressed myself against the wall beside the vending machine. 2 men came out of the dependent care wing, pushing a stretcher with a small sleeping woman on it, her arms held down by padded straps. I recognized her. Mrs. Weiss. She sang off-key Elvis songs on Sundays and called every man Captain. One of the men opened the lift with a card. I stepped in behind them at the last second, pretending to search my pocket for coins. You can't. The lift doors closed. I slammed the alarm button with all my strength. Nothing happened. The older man sighed. He didn't look angry. He looked annoyed, the way someone does when they've dropped a spoon. You should have stayed upstairs. The other one jabbed a syringe into my neck. I didn't black out completely. The world went soft, tilted. I saw the lift light slide across the metal blade of the doors. I felt my stomach rise as we began to descend farther than any normal basement should allow. The hum became a wordless voice. I woke up tied to a chair, but it wasn't a wheelchair. It was an old dental chair bolted to a concrete floor. In front of me was a room so large it couldn't possibly fit beneath the nursing home. The ceiling vanished into darkness. Copper wires hung down like roots. Dozens of beds were arranged in a circle, and in them lay residents from St. Catherine's. Some I knew. Others whose families probably thought they were in physiotherapy, resting, in some quiet room with a television. All of them had electrodes embedded in their temples, not stuck on, embedded. Thin copper wires entered the skin, held in place with stitches. The wires joined into thick bundles and sank into a vat at the center of the room. The vat was breathing. There's no other word for it. It was enormous, made of old metal and bone, filled with thick sludge that glowed blue-green. Its surface contracted and expanded like a lung. Every time the old people breathed, the sludge pulsed. Every time one of them moaned in their sleep, bubbles rose and burst, forming tiny mouths. At the bottom of the vat, there was darkness. Not an absence of light, a presence. Something black, folded in on itself, too large for the vat and, at the same time, still infantile. I saw it move and understood, without anyone telling me, that the hum did not come from the machines. It came from that thing feeding. The director of the nursing home was standing beside me. She wore a white coat over her dress. Her gloves reached her elbows. "Your mother is extraordinary," she said. "She still remembers things she no longer knows how to name. That's rare. Ownerless memories are very nutritious." I tried to speak. My tongue felt full of sand. She continued, pleased that I was awake. A declining brain produces unique patterns: resistance, repetition, loss, searching. A young mind defends itself too much. A mind like your mother's opens doors without realizing it. I looked across the beds until I found her. She was near the center of the circle. The green blanket covered her legs. They had placed a copper crown on her head, thin as lace. Her eyes moved beneath her closed eyelids. The vat pulsed. My mother whispered my real name. Not my father's name, mine. The thing at the bottom turned towards her. I don't know how I got free. Maybe the strap around my wrist was old. Maybe Diane had cut it before she disappeared. I want to believe that. I want to believe someone tried to help. I fell from the chair and broke a tooth on the concrete. The director called for the men, but the hum rose and all of them stopped. All of them except me. I ran to my mother. When I tore the first wire from her temple, the vat screamed. It wasn't a loud sound. It was intimate. It happened inside my eyes. I saw the kitchen of my childhood rot in a fraction of a second. I saw my dead father sit up in his hospital bed and laugh with the director's voice. I saw my mother feeding me soup when I had a fever, except the spoon was full of that glowing sludge. I tore out the second wire. The lights burst. In the darkness, the residents began to speak, all at once. Broken sentences, children's names, old addresses, prayers, recipes, forgotten telephone numbers. The room became a storm of shattered lives. Then a voice beneath all the others said, "Slower." My mother opened her eyes. They weren't white or black or possessed. They were her eyes, tired and lucid for the first time in years. "Son?" she said. "Don't look at it." I looked. The darkness had risen to the surface of the vat. It had no fixed shape. It used memories as skin. For one instant, it was Mrs. Weiss's face, then my father's. Then mine, older, lying in a bed, wires in my temples, smiling without teeth. The director approached me with a small surgical saw. "She can't live without this now," she said. "None of them can. We keep them lit." My mother raised her hand and touched the copper crown. "Liar," she said, and pulled. What happened next was not an explosion. It was an inhalation. The thing beneath the vat sucked all the air from the room. The men fell to their knees. The director dropped the saw and clutched her own throat. The copper wires whipped through the air, tearing chunks from the ceiling. I held my mother and felt her become far too light. The darkness did not leave the vat. It stretched beneath the floor like a tide moving through stone. It passed under my feet, climbed the walls, searched the beds. The residents began to wake. Some cried, some laughed. A man who had never spoken since I'd known him sat up and asked for a cigarette. Mrs. Weiss sang a single note, so pure that every wire around her turned incandescent. My mother pressed her mouth to my ear. "Don't feed it with fear." Then she died in my arms. I don't know how long I stayed there. I remember climbing a service staircase with her in my arms, though they tell me that would have been impossible. I remember opening a door beside the laundry room and stepping out into the rain. I remember the fire alarm ringing, far too late. St. Catherine's burned for 6 hours. On the news, they talked about a short circuit in the basement, illegal installations, criminal negligence. They found bodies, but not as many as they should have. The director was never found. They gave me sedatives at the hospital. I didn't take them. 2 months later, I received a letter with no return address. Inside was my mother's green blanket, carefully folded. It smelled of lavender and metal. There was also a photograph. It showed another nursing home in another city. A modern facade, a pretty garden, a brushed steel sign, Cedar Hills Senior Residence. In the third-floor window, behind the reflection of the trees, I saw a woman in a white coat. It wasn't exactly the director. Her face was younger, her hair was different, but her hand was resting against the glass, and from her wrist hung a copper wire. Since then, I visit nursing homes whenever I can. I don't go inside. I stay in the car parks, by the walls, waiting for the generators to shut off, for the lifts to stop, for the night to grow quiet enough. There is always a sound the others don't hear. Last week I found it again. The hum was coming from beneath a yellow building on the outskirts of Silver Pines. It was weak, newborn. I placed my hand against the ground and felt the pulse answer mine. Inhale, exhale. When I stood up, there was a very old woman at the ground floor window. Her head was tilted, 2 fingers resting against her left temple. She didn't seem to be looking at me. She seemed to be listening to instructions. Before the nurse closed the curtains, the woman opened her mouth and formed a silent word. I understood it anyway. Hungry. Thank you for joining me for another dose of nightmares. If you enjoyed the story, be sure to subscribe and leave a like, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you'd like even more stories to keep you awake at night, consider joining my Patreon, where you can read and listen to exclusive nightmares you won't find anywhere else. Until next time, happy nightmares.